When one of the most famous men on the planet received a phone call on a Tuesday afternoon that almost went to voicemail, he had no idea that the next 17 minutes would pull something loose inside him that had been held in place for 31 years. It was Tuesday, April 8, 2025. Orlando, Florida, 3:22 p.m. Shaquille O'Neal was in the back of his car on Interstate 4, returning from a foundation meeting downtown. 7 feet 1 inch tall, 325 pounds, he filled the rear seat of the black Escalade the way a grand piano fills a living room. Not unpleasantly, just completely. The afternoon light came in flat and gold through the tinted windows. His phone was in his hand. He was reviewing a document on the screen. The driver, Marcus, had the radio on low. Something jazz, something without words. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Area code 407, Central Florida. He almost let it ring. He picked up. Mr. O'Neal, a woman's voice. Controlled but tight at the edges, the way voices sound when they have been practicing calm for a long time and the calm is starting to slip. My name is Yvette Caldwell. I'm calling because nobody else will, and I didn't know who else to call. Shaq sat up straighter. Tell me your name again, he said. Yvette Caldwell, she said. I live on Briar Ridge Court in Apopka. I'm a neighbor of Doris Mae Simmons. He was quiet for 1 second, 2 seconds. Doris Mae Simmons. He hadn't heard that name said out loud in years. But something happened in his chest when he heard it. Something old. Something that had been sitting in the same corner of him since he was 4 years old and didn't know yet what to call it. What happened, he said. Yvette Caldwell took one breath, she said. She's being evicted, Mr. O'Neal. The county sent a notice last week. She has until April 30th to vacate the property. 22 days. She's 79 years old and she has nowhere to go and she doesn't know I'm calling you. She would be furious if she knew I was calling you. Shaq pressed his hand flat against the seat beside him. He did not speak for 3 full seconds. Marcus kept driving. The jazz kept playing low. The gold light moved across the seat. I'll call you back in 10 minutes, Shaq said. He ended the call. He looked out the window at the Florida afternoon, at the billboards, at the overpasses, at the flat, ordinary landscape of a Tuesday that had just become something else entirely. He thought about a woman's hands, small, dark, smelling like Jergens lotion and whatever she had been cooking. He thought about the sound of a screen door. He thought about a kitchen with yellow curtains and a radio on the counter playing gospel. He thought about being 4 years old and feeling safe. He hadn't thought about that kitchen in a very long time. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. You okay, boss? Change of plans, Shaq said. Take me to Apopka. Stay with us through this entire video. Because what Shaq found when he drove to Briar Ridge Court in Apopka that Tuesday afternoon is something that will reach back through decades and rearrange what you think you know about the people who made us who we are. And when the full truth comes out, when the connection between one woman and every version of Shaquille O'Neal that has ever existed becomes visible, it will hit you somewhere you were not expecting. But to understand what he was driving toward, you have to understand what he was driving away from. You have to go back past the 4 NBA championships, past the finals MVP awards and the business empire and the doctorate from Barry University and the 15 All-Star selections. Past all of it. You have to go past the first shoe contract and the magazine covers and the arenas that shook when he walked in. You have to go back past LSU and the Orlando Magic and the name that became a sound the whole world recognized. You have to go back to Newark, New Jersey, 1974. Shaq is 2 years old. Lucille O'Neal was 19 and working. She worked because she had a child and the child needed things, and needing things required money, and money required work. She worked the early shift when she could get it, and the late shift when she couldn't. She worked the double when the bills were what the bills were. She worked without complaining and without explaining, because that was the form her dignity took, and she knew it and she kept it. But a 19-year-old working doubles has a problem. The problem is time. The problem is what happens to a 2-year-old when his mother is not there. The problem is that children require presence in a way that no amount of money substitutes for and no amount of love from a distance replaces. The solution was the 3rd floor of the building on Clinton Avenue. The solution was Doris Mae Simmons. Doris Mae Simmons was 48 years old in 1974. She lived 3 floors up in the same building where Lucille and the baby had their apartment. She had been living in that building for 11 years. She had raised 3 children of her own in it, and they were grown now and gone, and the apartment was too quiet, the way apartments become too quiet when the children who filled them have left. She noticed Lucille. You didn't not notice Lucille. Even at 19, even exhausted, even carrying a baby that was already too large for the carrier he was supposed to fit in, Lucille O'Neill had a presence that a building registered. People noticed her. They made room. Doris noticed her, and Doris noticed the baby. She stopped Lucille in the stairwell one morning in March of 1974. She said, "That child is too big for that thing you've got him in." Lucille said, "I know it." Doris said, "How old?" Lucille said, 2. Doris looked at the baby. The baby looked at Doris. Something passed between them that neither of them spoke. "What time do you leave for work?" Doris said. 5:45, Lucille said. "Some mornings earlier." Doris Simmons nodded once. She said, "Bring him up at 5:30. I'll have him ready when you get back." Lucille O'Neill looked at this woman, this stranger with the steady eyes and the flower on her house dress, and the specific calm of someone who had been through enough to know what mattered. "I can't pay you much," Lucille said. "I didn't ask for much," Doris said. And that was it. That was all of it. That was the beginning. For the next 4 years, until Lucille moved the family, and life moved in the direction life moved, Shaquille O'Neill spent his mornings and his afternoons and sometimes his evenings in Doris Mae Simmons's apartment on the 3rd floor of the building on Clinton Avenue in Newark, New Jersey. He ate her food. He heard her radio. He slept on her couch when Lucille worked late. He learned what safe felt like in that apartment. He learned what it meant to be cared for by someone who had not been required to care for you. Doris never called herself a babysitter. She never called herself anything. She just opened the door when Lucille knocked, and she had the boy ready when Lucille came back, and in between she did what she did, which was take care of him the way she had taken care of her own children, completely and without making it into a thing. She had a yellow kitchen. The curtains were yellow. The radio was on the counter, and it played gospel in the morning and jazz in the afternoon. She kept Jergens lotion on the windowsill. She made oatmeal with brown sugar and bacon on the side, and she made him eat it all. She taught him words. She taught him to say please, and thank you, and yes ma'am, and no sir. She told him when he was 3 years old, looking directly at him with those steady eyes, "You are going to be something. I don't know what yet, but something." He didn't understand what she meant. He was 3. But he remembered the way she said it. He remembered the weight of it. When Lucille moved, she cried. Doris did not cry. She hugged Lucille, and she held the boy, and she said, "You keep in touch." Lucille said she would. She did, for a while. Letters, phone calls. Life does what life does. Decades moved. Distances grew. The boy grew into something the whole world knew about. Doris Mae Simmons moved too, eventually. Left Newark after her husband Lawrence died in 1991, followed her daughter to Florida. Settled in Apopka, which is 18 miles northwest of Orlando, which is where the boy she used to put to bed on her couch would eventually build his life. But they didn't know that about each other. They didn't know the distance between them had closed to 18 miles. Not until Tuesday, April 8, 2025, when a neighbor named Yvette Caldwell dialed a number she had found after 2 hours of internet searching and 1 moment of deciding to just do it. Briar Ridge Court in Apopka is a short street, 12 houses on it. The houses were built in the 1980s when Apopka was still farming country on the edge of Orlando's expansion. Most of them have been there so long that the landscaping has exceeded the original plans. Oak trees that were saplings in 1985 are now 50 feet tall. The street has the specific character of a place where people have been staying for a long time because they chose to stay, not because they couldn't leave. Number 7 on Briar Ridge Court was the smallest house on the street, white exterior with green shutters. A concrete front path with moss growing between the pavers. A persimmon tree in the side yard that had been producing fruit for 20 years. A porch with 2 plastic chairs on it. One of the chairs had a cushion and one of them didn't. Yvette Caldwell, 62 years old, retired school administrator, small and quick-moving with silver locks and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, was waiting on her own porch at number 9 when the black Escalade pulled onto Briar Ridge Court at 4:47 p.m. She came down her front steps when she saw it stop. Shaq stepped out of the car. Even after years of living near people who knew famous people, even after a lifetime in Central Florida where professional athletes were not a rare sight, Yvette Caldwell stopped walking for a moment when the full scale of him registered. 7 feet 1 inch. 325 pounds. He wore a plain gray pullover and dark pants. A watch. Nothing that announced anything. He was looking at the White House with the green shutters. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said. "Mr. O'Neill." She came the rest of the way down. They shook hands. She had to look up the way people look up at a tall building, a smooth, consistent upward tilt of the head. "She doesn't know you're coming." "I know that," he said. He looked at the house, at the front path, at the persimmon tree. "How long has she been here?" 31 years, Yvette said. "She moved in 1994. She's been my neighbor for 19 of those years. She watched my kids when they were small. She brought food when my husband had his surgery. She is the best person on this street, and she is being put out of her house because the property management company that bought the place 2 years ago decided they want to redevelop the lot." Yvette's voice was controlled, tight. "They gave her 90 days. She has 22 left." Shaq stood on the sidewalk in the afternoon light. He looked at the house. "Tell me about the money," he said. Yvette had done the research. She had the documents. She explained it standing on the sidewalk because they hadn't moved yet, neither of them. Doris Mae Simmons was on a fixed income. Social Security of $1,240 per month. A small pension from the county school district where she had worked as a cafeteria worker for 11 years in the 1970s and 80s. The pension was $310 per month. Her total monthly income was $1,550. The property management company, Suncrest Property Holdings, had sent the termination of tenancy notice when they determined the lot would be more valuable as part of a commercial redevelopment package on the Apopka corridor. They had offered a moving assistance payment of $2,000. $2,000 to move at 79 years old. The average one-bedroom apartment within 15 miles of her current location was $1,450 per month. Every place she could conceivably afford required first month, last month, and security deposit. That was $4,350 minimum. She had $880 in her checking account. She had $3,200 in a savings account she did not touch, which she had been saving since 2018 because it was for her grandson Deshaun's college, and she would not touch it. She had said this to Yvette calmly and without drama. She would not touch Deshaun's money. It was his. She would figure something else out. Shaq had gone completely still while Yvette was talking. Not still the way people go still when they are bored, still the way people go still when something is landing on them and they are receiving it completely. He pressed one enormous hand against his jaw. "She never called anyone," he said. "Not a question." "She has a daughter in Alabama," Yvette said. "The daughter has 4 children and a husband who is between jobs. Doris will not ask her. She has a son in Philadelphia. He has his own medical situation. She will not ask him. She called the county senior services office and they put her on a wait list. She is number 47 on the wait list." Yvette paused. "I have lived next to this woman for 19 years. She brought me soup when I had COVID. She has never, not once, asked me or anyone on this street for a single thing." Shaq was quiet for a moment. "Does she have a computer?" he said. "She has a tablet. Her grandson set it up for her. Does she know what I've done, who I am now? Would she know my name?" Yvette gave him a long look. "Mr. O'Neill, she has a photograph of you on her refrigerator. It's from a magazine. I've seen it in there 100 times. You're wearing a Lakers jersey. You can't be more than 23 in it." She paused. "She has never once told me why it's there." He pressed his hand over his mouth. He stood on the sidewalk of Briar Ridge Court in Apopka, Florida, on a Tuesday in April, and he pressed his enormous hand over his mouth, and he stood completely still. Then he took his hand away. "I'm going to knock on her door," he said. "She might not open it," Yvette said carefully. "If she sees it's you, she might not open it." "That's okay," he said. "I'll wait." He walked up the concrete path to the front porch of number 7. The moss between the pavers, the persimmon tree to his left, full of the small orange fruit in the late afternoon light. He stepped up onto the porch. He stood in front of the door. He was so large on that porch that the porch looked like a stage set built for a smaller production. He knocked. He waited. He heard movement inside, slow movement. The specific unhurried pace of a 79-year-old body that has learned over decades that rushing is unnecessary and counterproductive. The door opened. Doris Mae Simmons was 5 feet 2 inches tall. She had been 5 feet 4 when she was young, but the years had done what years do. She wore a pale blue house dress with small white flowers on it. Her hair was white and close-cropped. Her glasses were wire-rimmed and they sat slightly crooked on her face. Her hands, when she registered what was on her porch, went to her mouth. Both of them. She pressed both hands over her mouth, and she looked up at the largest person she had ever seen standing on her front porch. And Shaq looked down at her, and he saw the yellow kitchen. He saw it in her face. He saw the radio on the counter, and the gospel in the morning, and the oatmeal with brown sugar. He saw his 4-year-old self in her arms. He saw his mother's face when she knocked on this woman's door 51 years ago, and was given something that neither of them had a proper word for. "Doris," he said. His voice was not the voice from commercials. It was the other one, the quiet one. "It's me." She kept her hands over her mouth. Her eyes, behind the crooked glasses, were bright. She was not crying. She was doing what some people do at the very edge of overwhelming feeling, which is hold very still and let it move through. For 7 full seconds, nobody spoke. Then Doris Mae Simmons moved her hands away from her mouth. She said, "You'd better come in." Her living room was small and full, not cluttered. Full. 49 years of living in Florida, of building a life after Newark, of grandchildren and church and a garden she still kept herself. Photographs on every wall. A bookshelf with a Bible and a row of romance novels and a shelf of small ceramic angels. A television that was too large for the space because her grandson Deshaun had bought it for her birthday, and she would never tell him it was too large. A coffee table with a lace cover and a bowl of persimmons from the tree outside. Shaq sat down on her couch. The couch compressed under him the way furniture does when it was built for a different scale of person. He filled one end of it completely. Doris sat in the armchair across from him. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at him with the steady eyes, the same eyes, 51 years later, and they were exactly the same. "I know why you're here," she said. He looked at her. "Yvette called somebody," Doris said. Not angry, not surprised. The specific resigned wisdom of a woman who has seen many things and has stopped being shocked by which ones people can't keep to themselves. "She called me," he said. Doris nodded slowly. "I figured if she was going to call anyone, she'd call someone who could actually do something." A pause. "I told her not to." "I know you did," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. The television was off. The late afternoon light came through the front window at a flat angle, catching the ceramic angels on the shelf, making them glow faintly. "I had it planned out," Doris said. Her voice was even. She was not performing the evenness. It was simply how she spoke, had always spoken, the voice of someone who had made peace with the distance between what she wanted and what was available. "I was going to ask Reverend Michaels if the church could help me store my things for a few weeks while I found somewhere. There's a woman from my Bible study whose sister has a room she rents out in Kissimmee. It's small, but it's something." She unfolded her hands and refolded them. "I was going to be fine." Shaq was quiet for a moment. "You've been here 31 years, he said. 31 years in April, she said. "Lawrence and I moved in together. He passed 8 months after we moved." She said it the way she would say the weather, not with armor. With the specific acceptance of someone who has had a long time to sit with something and has made their peace with it in the particular way that doesn't mean it no longer hurts. 30 years alone in this house, Shaq said. "With the persimmon tree," she said, and something in her voice changed very slightly when she said it. Almost nothing, but he heard it. "You planted it. Lawrence planted it the year we moved in, for our anniversary. He said it would take about 5 years to produce fruit and we'd be eating persimmons for the rest of our lives." She looked at the window, at the light coming through. He was right about the persimmons. The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere down the street, a lawnmower ran in the middle distance. A car passed slowly with its radio on, the late Florida afternoon doing what it did. Shaq leaned forward, both enormous forearms on his knees, his hands the size of the coffee table's lace cover, folded together. "I want to tell you something," he said. "I want to tell you something and I need you to hear it all the way before you say anything." Doris looked at him, the steady eyes. "When I was 2 years old," he said, "my mother was working. She was working doubles. She was working whatever she could get. She was 19 and she had me and she was doing the thing she had decided she was going to do, which was take care of her child and not ask for anything she didn't have to ask for." He stopped. He was looking at his hands. "She found you." Doris was very still. "I don't remember all of it," he said. "I was too young to remember all of it. But I remember some of it. I remember your kitchen. I remember the radio. I remember the oatmeal." He looked up at her. "I remember feeling safe." Doris pressed her lips together. She looked at the window. "My mother talked about you," he said, "when I was older. She said there was a woman in Newark who took care of me when she couldn't. She said that woman had gentle hands and a yellow kitchen, and she never once made my mother feel like she owed her anything." He paused. "She said that woman was one of the good ones." Doris Simmons did not cry. She was not that kind of woman, and she had not been that kind of woman in many years. But her mouth trembled for one moment, just one, and then she brought it back. "Your mother was a remarkable young woman," she said. Her voice was steady. "I knew that the first time I saw her in that stairwell. I knew she was going to make something of herself. I was just there to hold the boy while she did." "You were there for 4 years," he said. "Thereabouts," she said. "4 years is not just holding a boy," he said. 4 years is raising him." She looked at him for a long time. "Your mother raised you," she said. "Yes," he said, "and you helped, and I am here today because of both of those things." He leaned forward a little further. "And I need you to let me help you now, not because I owe you, not as a debt, because it is the right thing to do, and because I am able to do it, and because I have been thinking about a yellow kitchen since I got off the phone 45 minutes ago, and I am not leaving Briar Ridge Court until I know you are going to be okay." The room was very quiet again. Doris Mae Simmons looked at her hands, the hands that had made oatmeal for a 2-year-old 51 years ago, the hands that had held him when he was sick and carried him when he was tired and taught him words he still used. She looked at those hands for a long time, and then she looked up at him, and she said, "You look like yourself. I thought you might look different, but you look exactly like yourself." He pressed both hands flat over his eyes. He stayed that way for 5 seconds. Then he moved them. He said, "Tell me what you want to do. Not what's available. What you want." She thought about this. "I want to stay in Apopka," she said. "My church is here. My friends are here. Deshaun comes to visit here. I don't want to start over somewhere new." She looked at the window. "I want a garden, even a small one. I need somewhere to grow things." She paused. "And I want the persimmon tree to go with me if I move. I know that sounds foolish." "It doesn't sound foolish," he said. She smiled. It was a small smile, the contained kind, but it reached her eyes. "Lawrence planted it. I'm not leaving it for someone to tear up." "I understand," he said. And then he said the thing he had been thinking since he was in the car on I-4 looking at the Florida billboards. "What if you didn't have to move?" She looked at him. "What if we bought the property?" he said. "Not me personally. The foundation. My foundation has a housing arm. We could acquire the property from Suncrest Holdings. Take it off the redevelopment table. You stay in your house, with your church, with your garden, with the persimmon tree." He looked at her. What if that was the solution? Doris Simmons sat in her armchair and was quiet for a very long moment. Outside the window, the persimmon tree moved in the late afternoon breeze. The small orange fruits moved with it. "How much would that cost?" she said. "Less than you think," he said. "The property is listed at an assessed value that makes the acquisition reasonable. The foundation has done more expensive things with less meaningful outcomes." She was quiet again. "Shaquille," she said. She said his full name the way she had said it when he was small, which was with a weight and attention that the name deserved. "I don't want to be a charity case." "You're not a charity case," he said immediately. "A charity case is when someone gives something to make themselves feel better. This is not that." He looked at her steadily. "My mother gave me everything she could give me. You gave her someone to trust when she needed someone to trust. That is a chain of giving that I am now a part of. That is not charity. That is family doing what family does." Doris looked at him for a long time. For 11 full seconds she was completely still. Then she said, "All right." What happened next happened in 2 directions at once. The first direction was visible. Shaq called his foundation director, a woman named Karen Osei, 41 years old, precise and tireless, from the front porch of number 7 Briar Ridge Court at 5:18 p.m. He explained the situation with the specific efficiency of a man who has been solving large problems for a long time. Karen asked 3 questions. She started making calls before they had finished speaking. The second direction was invisible. It happened in the car while Marcus drove Shaq back to Orlando through the dark orange of the Florida evening. Shaq sat in the back of the Escalade and did not look at his phone. He looked out the window. He thought about a stairwell in Newark. He thought about his mother at 19 years old. He thought about the chain of things that had to be true for him to be sitting in the back of this car on this particular Tuesday in April. He thought about Doris Mae Simmons making oatmeal with brown sugar for a 2-year-old who would one day be 7 feet 1 inch tall. He thought about what it means to take care of someone else's child the way you would take care of your own, without ceremony, without record, without any expectation that the accounting would ever come due. He thought about Lawrence planting the persimmon tree for their anniversary. He said it would take 5 years to produce fruit and they would be eating persimmons for the rest of their lives. Lawrence had died 8 months after they moved in, but the tree was still producing fruit 30 years later. He pressed his hand flat against the car window. He thought about the things that outlast us. Karen Osei moved fast. She had been with the foundation for 6 years, and she moved the way people move when they understand that urgency is not performance but a form of respect. By 9 p.m. on Tuesday, she had reached a contact at Suncrest Property Holdings. By Wednesday morning, she had a preliminary conversation with their legal team. By Wednesday afternoon, she had a number. The property at 7 Briar Ridge Court had been acquired by Suncrest as part of a portfolio purchase. Their redevelopment plans for the Apopka corridor had stalled in permitting. The property was an outlier in the portfolio, one residential lot that didn't fit their commercial plans. They were looking to offload it at a number that made the foundation's acquisition straightforward. By Thursday morning, April 10, 2025, the foundation had submitted a letter of intent. Karen called Shaq at 7:45 a.m. "It's going to work," she said. He was in his kitchen in Orlando with his coffee. He was looking out the window at the Florida morning. A mockingbird was on the back fence, running through its catalog of borrowed songs. "How fast?" he said. "If Suncrest is motivated, and they appear to be, 30 to 45 days, Karen said, well before her notice expires. He looked at the mockingbird. "One more thing," he said. "The house is going to need work. It's 31 years old and she's 79 and living on a fixed income. Get someone out there this week for a full assessment. Roof, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, whatever it needs. Foundation pays." Karen made a note. "And Karen, she doesn't know any of this yet. The acquisition, the repairs, none of it. I'm going to tell her myself when we're further along. Can we keep this quiet?" "Absolutely," Karen said. "And one more thing," he said. "The grandson, Deshaun, how old is he?" Karen checked her notes. 17. He's a junior at Apopka High School. He's a basketball player. He plays point guard. His stats look solid." Shaq was quiet for a moment. "Put him on the list for the Foundation Scholarship Program," he said. "Full review. He goes through the same process as everyone else. No special treatment. But put him on the list." He ended the call. He finished his coffee. The mockingbird was still on the fence, still cycling through its repertoire. It could do 11 different calls. Shaq had counted them once. He thought about Lucille, his mother. The specific way she had talked about the woman in Newark. Not often, not at length, but with a precision that meant she had carried it carefully. She said that woman had gentle hands. She said that woman never made her feel like she owed anything. He thought about what it cost to give like that, without record, without ledger, without any expectation that the thing you gave would ever come back. He thought, that is what I am made of. That woman made some part of what I am. And I did not know her name was Doris Mae Simmons, and she was on a 22-day eviction notice in Apopka until a neighbor named Yvette Caldwell spent 2 hours on the internet and decided to just do it. He set down his coffee cup. He called Marcus. "Can you drive me somewhere this morning?" he said. He went back to Briar Ridge Court. He brought breakfast. Not from somewhere expensive. From the diner on US 441 in Apopka that he had passed on the way in. Scrambled eggs and grits and biscuits in a paper bag. He had learned that when you show up at someone's door uninvited for the second time in 2 days, you should bring food. Doris was in her garden when he arrived. A small garden in the back of the house. Tomatoes and peppers and herbs. She was on her knees with a trowel, which told him things about her that he had already suspected. She looked up when she heard the gate. She saw the paper bag. "You brought breakfast," she said. "I brought breakfast," he confirmed. "Well," she said. She sat back on her heels. "Help me up." He extended one enormous hand and she took it, and she was on her feet, small and steady, brushing the dirt from her knees with a matter-of-factness that told him she had been getting up from that garden for many years, and she intended to continue. They sat on the back porch and ate. The persimmon tree was visible from there, to the left of the garden. In the morning light it had a different quality than it had in the afternoon. Softer, more private. "You came back," she said. "I'm going to come back for a while," he said, "if that's all right." She ate her grits. She did not say anything for a moment. "Deshaun is coming to visit Saturday," she said. "He's 17. He plays basketball. He would lose his mind. I'll be here Saturday," he said. She looked at him. "You don't have to do that," she said. "No," he agreed. "I don't have to do it." He looked at the persimmon tree. "I want to." The acquisition of 7 Briar Ridge Court closed on May 2, 2025, 28 days after Yvette Caldwell made her call. 15 days before Doris's eviction notice would have taken effect. Suncrest Property Holdings, once it became clear that the acquiring party was a well-funded charitable foundation with no interest in any of their other properties, and every interest in a quiet and expedient transaction, moved with a speed their legal team had not previously demonstrated. The property transferred to the Lucille O'Neill Community Preservation Trust, which is what Karen Ossie named it when she drew up the documents, because she had been with the foundation long enough to know what mattered to Shaq and what names meant what. When Karen sent him the final paperwork with that name on it, he looked at it for a long time. He did not respond immediately. He set his phone down on the desk. He looked at the wall. Then he picked the phone back up and he sent Karen a single word. Perfect. On Saturday, May 3rd, one day after the closing, Shaq drove back to Briar Ridge Court. This time he arrived at 10 a.m. Deshaun Simmons was already there. Deshaun Simmons, 17 years old, 6 feet 1 inch tall, lean and fast-looking in the way of teenage boys who have put in the hours in the gym. He wore a Kobe Bryant jersey, which Shaq registered with amusement but did not mention. He was sitting on his grandmother's porch when the Escalade pulled up. He stood up slowly, the way teenagers stand up when they are trying to be cool about something they are not cool about at all. Shaq stepped out of the car. Deshaun took one step forward and stopped. "Grandma," he said, very quietly, to the woman who had appeared in the doorway behind him. "Why is Shaquille O'Neal at your house?" Doris folded her arms. "Because I invited him," she said, which was not entirely inaccurate. They sat in the backyard for 3 hours. Shaq and Doris and Deshaun and the persimmon tree. They ate lunch, which Doris made because Doris was not going to let someone else provide food in her home on a Saturday. Chicken and rice and green beans from the garden. Deshaun asked questions. Not careful, polite questions. Real ones. About the NBA, about the business side of things, about what it was like to be too big for every chair. Shaq answered them all. He answered them with the same attention he gave everyone when he was paying attention, which was complete and unhurried. At some point, Doris went inside to do something in the kitchen. Shaq and Deshaun were left at the table in the backyard with the persimmon tree. Deshaun said, "How do you know my grandmother?" And Shaq told him. Not all of it, the shape of it. A woman in Newark who had taken care of him when he was small while his mother worked. How he hadn't known where she was. How he had found out she was here. How he had come. Deshaun was quiet while he listened. When Shaq finished, Deshaun looked at the persimmon tree. Then he looked at his hands. "She never told me any of that," he said. "She probably didn't think it was about her," Shaq said. "That's how she is." Deshaun nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly how she is." Doris came back out with a pitcher of lemonade. She poured 3 glasses without asking if anyone wanted any. She sat down. She looked at the two of them. "What did I miss?" she said. "Nothing," Shaq said. She looked at him. The steady eyes, crooked glasses. "You're a terrible liar," she said. "You always were." He laughed, the big laugh, the room-filling one, which in the open air of the backyard filled the whole yard. Deshaun jumped slightly at the sound of it, and Doris Mae Simmons smiled. Not the small, contained smile from the armchair, the real one. The one she probably gave to a 2-year-old in a yellow kitchen 51 years ago. The full story of what happened came out in stages, which is how things like this come out. Not all at once, not in a press conference, but in the organic way that things travel when people talk to people. Yvette Caldwell told it to her daughter, who mentioned it at her church. The church was the same church Doris attended. By the following Sunday, the congregation knew, not the full details of the acquisition or the trust, but the shape of it. A famous man who had been cared for as a small child had come back to take care of the woman who cared for him. The Reverend mentioned it in his sermon. He did not say any names. He didn't need to. Someone took a photograph of the persimmon tree in early May and posted it on a local Facebook group. The caption said, "Some trees outlast what planted them." The post had nothing else on it, no explanation, but within the neighborhood of people who knew Briar Ridge Court, it was understood. It was not a viral story. It did not have 11 million views. Shaq had specifically asked that the acquisition not be publicized, and Karen Ossie had specifically built the trust structure in a way that kept the transaction private. The foundation's name was not used publicly. The media did not know. What happened instead was smaller and more lasting. 3 families on Briar Ridge Court, who were also facing pressure from Suncrest Property Holdings, were contacted by the Lucille O'Neill Community Preservation Trust and offered acquisition support for their properties. All 3 accepted. The trust, by September of 2025, had acquired 5 properties on Briar Ridge Court. All 5 residents remained in their homes. All 5 were on fixed incomes. All 5 had received no explanation beyond a letter from a charitable trust and an offer to purchase their property and transfer it to a protected residential status. Doris Mae Simmons remained at number 7. Her kitchen was repainted in July. The contractor who did the work came in on a Thursday and asked what color she wanted. She said yellow. She said it quickly, without hesitating, the way you say a thing when the answer was already there. He did it in yellow. On a Saturday in October 2025, Shaq drove back to Briar Ridge Court for the 7th time since April. He brought breakfast again. He always brought breakfast. It had become a thing between them, this ritual, the paper bag from the diner on US 441. Deshaun was there again. He came most Saturdays now. He brought his stat sheet from the previous week's game, and Shaq read them with the focused attention of someone who knows what numbers mean in a basketball context. Deshaun had been accepted into the Foundation's scholarship review program. He was a serious student and a serious player. The coaches at 3 mid-major universities had been watching him. The numbers were telling a clear story. That October Saturday, after breakfast, while Deshaun was in the kitchen helping Doris with the dishes because she had raised him and he had been raised properly, Shaq sat on the back porch alone with the persimmon tree. The October light in Florida is different from the April light. It has a quality of letting go that the spring light doesn't have. Cooler. Longer. The shadows come at different angles. The persimmon tree was heavy with fruit, small and orange and abundant. Shaq looked at it for a long time. He thought about Lawrence planting it in 1994 for an anniversary. He thought about Lawrence dying 8 months later. He thought about Doris staying in the house for 31 years with the tree that Lawrence planted. He thought about the tree producing fruit every October for 30 years, and Doris picking the persimmons and doing whatever Doris did with persimmons, and the tree not knowing or caring who was watching it or what had happened to the man who put it in the ground. Some things outlast what planted them. He thought about a woman in a stairwell in Newark who said, "What time do you leave for work?" and opened a door that changed the shape of everything that came after. He thought about his mother saying that woman had gentle hands. That woman had a yellow kitchen. That woman never made her feel like she owed anything. He thought about what it means to take care of someone else's child the way you take care of your own, without ceremony, without record, without any expectation of return. He thought about where he was sitting right now. A back porch in Apopka. October. The persimmon tree. He thought, I am here because she was there. I am this because she was that. There is a line between who I became and what she gave, and the line is not broken, and I didn't know it until a Tuesday in April when a neighbor named Yvette Caldwell decided to just make the call. Inside, Doris was telling Deshaun something. He could hear her voice but not the words. Deshaun laughed at something she said. The kitchen was warm, and the dishes were being done, and the family that had been built in this house across 31 years was doing what family does, which is the ordinary things, the Tuesday things, the dishes in the kitchen things, that make up 90% of a life and matter more than most people account for until someone tries to take them away. Shaq looked at the persimmon tree. He thought about his stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, who used to say that being big means nothing if you don't stand for something. He had said it in many forms across many years. He had said it as a command, and he had said it as a question, and he had said it as a reminder on Tuesday evenings when Shaq was 15, and thought he knew what standing for something looked like. Sergeant Harrison meant the court. He meant the game. He meant the body and what you did with it. But Shaq had come to understand that what he meant was larger than the court. He meant every room. He meant every Tuesday. He meant every moment when you could choose the small thing or the right thing and you had to pick. He looked at the tree. He thought, A woman in a stairwell in Newark in 1974 chose the right thing. She did not know what it would become. She did not know the boy she was offering to care for would one day sit on a porch in Apopka looking at a tree his neighbor's husband planted. She just opened the door. She just said, "Bring him up at 5:30. That is what standing for something looks like when it is not announced, when it is not in a stadium. When it is a woman in a house dress in a stairwell making a quiet decision that will run forward through the years and show up, decades later, in the form of a man on a porch thinking about everything she made possible. Doris came out with lemonade. She sat in her chair. She looked at the tree. "It's heavy this year," she said. "It's a good tree," he said. She looked at him with the steady eyes, the crooked glasses. "Lawrence would like you," she said. He liked people who didn't make a fuss. He smiled. The October afternoon continued around them. A car passed on Briar Ridge Court. Somewhere a child was calling out about something. A dog answered from a yard down the street. The persimmon tree held its fruit in the cooling light. And somewhere out there right now, there is someone who took care of you when you were too small to understand what taking care of meant. Someone who opened a door. Someone who made oatmeal. Someone who said bring him up at 5:30 without asking what you could give in return. Someone who made the right thing look like an ordinary thing so that you could receive it without feeling the weight of owing it. You may not know where they are. You may not have a phone number, or an address, or a neighbor named Yvette who made the call, but they exist. They existed. And some part of what you are is exactly what they made possible. And the question that this story asks, quietly, without insisting, is simply this. When you find out where they are, what will you do? Because Yvette Caldwell made the call. Because the call got answered. Because a man who had not heard the name Doris Mae Simmons, said out loud in years, heard it, and felt something shift in his chest, and said change of plans, and drove to Apopka. Because a yellow kitchen is still yellow, 30 years later, on Briar Ridge Court. Because the persimmon tree is producing fruit this October and every October, and will produce fruit next October too. Because some things outlast what planted them. Because being big means nothing if you don't stand for something. And standing for something looks like this. A back porch, a paper bag from the diner, a woman with steady eyes and a crooked pair of glasses who made oatmeal with brown sugar for a 2-year-old who would one day be the largest man most people had ever seen. And that is the story of what it means to take care of someone you didn't have to take care of, and what it means when that someone comes back. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. We have viewers from Orlando, from Newark, from Apopka, from every city where someone took care of somebody else's child because it needed to be done. We read every single comment, every one, and we love knowing where this community reaches. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone who took care of you when they didn't have to, if it made you want to find that person and make a call, please hit the like button right now. 1 second, 1 tap. It helps this story reach someone tonight who needs to hear it. Someone who took care of a child in a stairwell and has never been told what that meant. Because right now, somewhere, there is a Doris Mae Simmons, someone who made oatmeal for a child who wasn't hers, someone who said bring him up at 5:30, and meant it, and did it for 4 years, and never kept a ledger, and never asked for anything back, and has never told anyone that she did it. She is living in a house she has lived in for 30 years, with a garden she tends herself. And she says she is fine. And she is fine in the way that people are fine when fine is the word they have decided to use. And she deserves to still be in that house next October, and the October after that. This story is for her, and for the person who needs to find her, and make the call. If you are new here, welcome. Subscribe and join a community that believes the quiet things, the stairwell things, the 5:30 things, are the things that matter most. Share this video with one person today. Just one. The one who knows who took care of them. The one who hasn't made the call yet. Because that is exactly how this kind of love travels. One person deciding to just do it. One yellow kitchen at a time. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is something you are absolutely not going to see coming. We will see you there. There is something about the way Doris Mae Simmons moved through her house that Shaq noticed on his second visit and has thought about many times since. She moved the way people move when they have been in the same space for long enough that the space has become an extension of the body. She did not look for things. She reached for them. The coffee cups were always where the coffee cups were. The dish towel was always on the same hook. The reading glasses that were not on her face were on the small table beside her armchair. There was no searching. There was only the accumulated precision of 31 years of living in one place. He had noticed this because he had lived in many places. He had lived in Newark, and then in Germany, and then in Georgia, and then in San Antonio, and then in Baton Rouge, and then in Orlando, and then in Los Angeles, and then in Miami, and then back in Orlando. He lived in places that were temporary on the way to places that were slightly less temporary. He had lived in hotel rooms and rental properties and houses that were too big, and houses that were too public, and houses that were fine but were never quite what his mother's apartment had been, which was the particular small home of someone who was staying. Doris was staying. She had always been staying. She had stayed for 31 years in a house on a short street in Apopka with a persimmon tree in the side yard, and a garden in the back, and the church 2 miles away, and the neighbor Yvette at number 9. She had stayed the way some people stay, completely and without ambivalence, as if leaving had simply never been a category that applied to her. And someone had decided that her staying was worth less than whatever could be built on the lot where her staying had taken place. Shaq thought about this a great deal in the weeks after he found her. Not with anger exactly. With the specific quiet that comes when you understand something clearly and have decided what you are going to do about it and are doing it. Karen Osei, his foundation director, had said on their second call that the acquisition was straightforward, but that the pattern it represented was not. Suncrest Property Holdings had been purchasing older residential properties in the Apopka and Ocoee corridors for 2 years, mostly single-story homes built in the 1970s and 1980s, mostly occupied by elderly or fixed-income residents, mostly people who had been in their homes for decades and whose homes were worth more to a development portfolio than they were to the residents. "How many properties have they acquired?" Shaq asked. Karen had the number. 47 in the past 24 months. 11 in the Apopka area specifically. Shaq was quiet. "How many of those properties are still occupied by the original residents?" Karen paused. She checked her data. 3, she said. Doris Simmons and 2 others. Everyone else has moved. He was very still for a moment. "Find the others," he said. "The ones still in their homes. And find out where the ones who moved went, if you can." Karen found them. It took 2 weeks, but she found them. The 2 others still in their homes were both on Briar Ridge Court. Ellison Carter, 73 years old, retired electrician at number 3, who had been in his house since 1988, and Margaret Odom, 81 years old, retired schoolteacher at number 11, who had been there since 1979. Both had received termination of tenancy notices. Both had deadlines approaching. Neither had told anyone. Of the displaced residents, Karen had found contact information for 9 of the 11 who had left. 7 of them were in rental situations that cost significantly more than what they had been paying. 2 were in assisted living facilities that had been arranged on an emergency basis by family members. 1 was staying with a daughter in Kissimmee. 1 had moved to a different city to be closer to her son. She had a brief call with 4 of them. All 4 used the same word when she asked how things were going. Fine. They were all fine. Karen reported this to Shaq on a Thursday morning in May. "I want to help the others," he said. "The 2 still on the street. And I want to find housing solutions for at least some of the ones who moved, if they want to come back." Karen had already been thinking about this. She explained the structure she was proposing. The trust would acquire the remaining occupied properties on Briar Ridge Court. It would also acquire several vacant properties in the same corridor that Suncrest had cleared, with the intention of developing them as affordable housing for fixed-income seniors, specifically designed so that residents could stay, age in place, maintain their gardens, their churches, their routines. The program would be called the Briar Ridge Initiative, named for the street, not named for Shaq. He had been specific about that. "It's named for the street," he said, "because the street is what we're protecting." The Briar Ridge Initiative was formally established in June 2025. By the end of August, it had acquired 7 properties in the Apopka corridor. Ellison Carter at number 3 received his letter from the trust on a Friday afternoon and called Yvette Caldwell immediately. Yvette called Doris. Doris already knew, because Shaq had told her the week before, but she let Yvette tell her again. Margaret Odom, at number 11, 81 years old, retired schoolteacher, had been in her home since 1979. When she received her letter from the trust, she read it 3 times. She called her daughter in Gainesville. Her daughter drove down the next day. They sat at the kitchen table together and the daughter cried and Margaret said, I told you it would work out." She had not actually said this before. She had been quietly terrified for 6 weeks. But she said it to her daughter because that was what the moment called for, and because it turned out she had been right, even if she hadn't known she was going to be. By September 2025, 4 of the 9 displaced residents had returned to the Apopka corridor. Not to their original homes, which were no longer available, but to new affordable units that the trust had developed on the cleared lots. Their monthly costs were significantly lower than what they had been paying in their emergency arrangements. 3 of them had gardens. One of them, a woman named Rosa Esteves, 74 years old, had a lemon tree she had transported from her previous location in a large pot. She planted it in her new yard. She said she would give it 5 years. Karen Osei documented all of this in the Trust's quarterly report. The report was internal, not public. The Trust operated quietly, as it had from the beginning. The one thing that became semi-public happened by accident. Deshaun Simmons, 17 years old, posted a photograph on his Instagram account in October. It showed the back porch of number 7 Briar Ridge Court. In the photograph you could see the garden on the left and the persimmon tree heavy with fruit and 2 chairs on the porch, one large and one regular-sized, and on the table between them 2 glasses of lemonade. Deshaun had not shown the faces of the people in the chairs. The caption said, "Spent Saturday with my grandmother and a new friend. Some things come back around." The post had 47 followers at the time. 4 of them were people who knew Briar Ridge Court. One of them was a local journalist named Patricia Helm who wrote a column about Orange County community issues for a regional newsletter. She had no idea who was in the chairs. She just saw the persimmon tree and the lemonade and felt something that made her save the photograph to her phone. She would write about it later. In February 2026, when the Briar Ridge Initiative had become visible enough that the story could be told in terms of the program without centering on any individual person. She wrote it that way, as a story about the program and what it had done for 11 families on a short street in Apopka. She mentioned the trust. She mentioned the initiative. She did not name the funding source. She did not name Shaq. She described the persimmon tree. The column had 912 readers. Several of them lived in other parts of Orange County where similar development pressures existed. 3 of them called the number for the trust. Karen Osei returned all 3 calls. On a Saturday in December 2025, Shaq drove to Briar Ridge Court for the 11th time. The December Florida morning was cool by Florida standards, which meant it was in the low 60s and the light had the specific clarity that Florida light has when it is not complicated by heat. He brought the paper bag from the diner on US 441. He always brought the paper bag. It had become the thing between them, the signal, the ritual. Doris heard the car, and she was already at the door when he came up the path. Deshaun was there again. Deshaun was almost always there on Saturdays now. He had received his scholarship award in November, a full academic scholarship to the University of Florida for the following fall, renewable for 4 years, conditional on academic performance. He had called Shaq when the letter came. He had been trying very hard to sound calm and had not entirely succeeded. They ate breakfast on the back porch, the December light on the persimmon tree. The fruit was gone now, picked and used, but the tree was still full of leaves, still green, still completely itself in the cool morning air. Doris poured the lemonade. She always poured the lemonade. It was her house, and she was going to pour the lemonade. Deshaun was talking about his college plans, his major, his ideas, the particular energy of a 17-year-old who can finally see the path. He talked with his hands. He talked with his whole body. Doris watched him. She watched him with the steady eyes and the crooked glasses and the expression of a woman who has spent her entire life watching children become themselves and has never gotten tired of seeing it happen. Shaq watched her watch him. He thought about his mother at 19 in a stairwell asking this woman what time she left for work. He thought about the version of himself that had been 4 years old in a yellow kitchen. He thought about all the Saturdays he had spent in this kitchen since April. He thought about what it meant to find someone, to actually find them, to not let the distance stay distance. He thought about his stepfather. Being big means nothing if you don't stand for something, he thought. This is what standing for something looks like on a Saturday morning. A paper bag from the diner. A persimmon tree. A 17-year-old talking about his college plans. A woman with steady eyes watching him talk. Doris said something to Deshaun. He laughed. She smiled the real smile. Shaq poured more lemonade. The December morning continued. The light moved. The tree was very green. Somewhere out there right now, there is a woman who took care of a child when that child's parent needed someone to take care of a child. She did it without ceremony. She did it because it needed doing. She did it the way good things get done when nobody is announcing them, which is quietly and completely. And that child is now an adult, who has maybe forgotten or maybe not forgotten but has not been back. Has not knocked on the door, has not brought the paper bag from the diner. Maybe the address is different. Maybe the years have changed things. Maybe you don't know how to find her. Maybe it feels like too much time has passed. It has not been too much time. It is never too much time. The persimmon tree is still producing fruit. She is still there. Find out where she is. Make the call. Bring breakfast. Sit on the porch. That is the whole thing. That is the complete instruction. The rest is just showing up. And that is the story of a 2-year-old in Newark and a yellow kitchen and a persimmon tree in Apopka and 31 years of staying and what comes back when you find the people who made you and you tell them that you know what they did. That is all. That is enough. That is the story. There is one more thing that belongs in this story. It is small, and it happened in January 2026, and it does not appear in any document that Karen Osei keeps. Shaq drove back to Briar Ridge Court on a Thursday in January, not a Saturday. Not with breakfast. He came in the afternoon because he had a meeting in Apopka, and found himself with 90 minutes before his next obligation, and Briar Ridge Court was 6 minutes away. He had not called ahead. He parked and walked up to the door. He knocked. Doris opened the door. She was holding a dish towel. Behind her the kitchen smelled like something warm and specific. Cinnamon. Something with cinnamon. "You didn't bring breakfast," she said. "It's 3 in the afternoon," he said. "That didn't stop you last time," she said. She stepped back. "Come in." The kitchen was the yellow kitchen now. The new paint from July. The yellow curtains she had brought back from storage because they had always been the curtains and there was no reason for them not to be the curtains. The radio on the counter. Gospel in the afternoon. Something he recognized. He stood in the kitchen and looked at it. He did not say anything for a moment. Doris was at the counter. There was a pan of something. She was cutting it into squares. Spice cake, he thought. Something with cinnamon and something warm. "Sit down," she said, without looking at him. "I'll cut you a piece." He sat at the kitchen table. Small table. Blue and white checkered tablecloth. 1 chair on each side. He took one side, and his knees were too long for the table, and he adjusted. The way he always adjusted. Sideways and at an angle, the body negotiating its way into spaces that were built for smaller configurations. She put a plate in front of him. The cake. A fork. She sat on the other side with her own piece. The radio played. The gospel in the afternoon. Through the window the January light on the garden, which was resting now, the way gardens rest in Florida in January, not dead but waiting. "I've been thinking about something," Shaq said. "Tell me," she said. "I've been thinking about what you gave my mother," he said. "Not what you gave me. What you gave her. The thing you gave her was trust. She was 19 years old and she was alone, and she had this enormous child she loved completely, and she needed to work, and she could not be in 2 places at once." He looked at the cake on the plate. He was not eating yet. "You gave her permission to go to work. You gave her the ability to be who she needed to be because you were there being who she needed you to be." He looked up. "I don't think she ever said that to you." Doris was very still. "I don't think she had the words for it," he said. "She was 19. She was grateful. But the full size of what you gave her she might not have known how to say." Doris looked at her plate. "Your mother thanked me," she said quietly, "many times. She always had beautiful manners." "I know she did," he said. "But I want to tell you from me, as the person who became what he became partly because a woman in a yellow kitchen in Newark was steady and good and took care of him when his mother was doing the work that needed doing." He stopped. He looked at her. "I know what you did. I know what it cost, and I know what it was worth. And I needed to come here on a Thursday afternoon and tell you that I know." The radio played. Something slow and sure. Doris Mae Simmons put her fork down. She looked at her hands on the table. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Lawrence always said the things you do for people come back to you. Not in the same form, not the same way. He said kindness doesn't travel in a straight line, it circles." She looked up. "I never knew what that looked like until this spring." The January light moved through the window. She picked up her fork. "Eat your cake," she said. He ate his cake. It was very good. Cinnamon and something he couldn't name exactly. Warm and specific in the way of things made from memory. "What is this?" he said. "My mother's recipe," she said. "Lawrence loved it. I make it every January because that was his birthday month." She looked at the window. 34 years and I still make it." He ate his cake. The gospel played. The garden waited outside. The yellow kitchen was exactly what it was supposed to be. They sat at that table for an hour. They talked about Deshawn's college preparation. They talked about the garden and what she planned to put in it in March. They talked about the church and the woman from her Bible study who had a persimmon jam recipe she had been trying to get Doris to make for years, and Doris had finally agreed to try it. They talked about Yvette at number 9 who had recently acquired a new dog and whose relationship with the dog was, in Doris's measured assessment, entirely too much. They laughed. Shaq laughed the big laugh, the room-filling one. And in the small yellow kitchen it filled the room entirely. Doris shook her head and smiled the real smile. "You've always been too loud," she said. "I've been told," he said. She refilled his lemonade without asking if he wanted more. He stayed until 4:30. Then he had to go. He stood at the door and she stood in the doorway, small and steady in the January afternoon light. "I'll be back Saturday," he said. "I know," she said. "Bring the good biscuits, not the other ones. The ones from the counter, or the ones in the basket." "You know which ones I mean," she said. He did. He went down the concrete path. The persimmon tree, bare of fruit now but full of leaves, moved slightly in the January breeze. He got in the car. Marcus pulled away from the curb. Shaq looked back at the house as the car turned. The yellow curtains in the kitchen window. The steady woman in the doorway, watching him go. He turned back to face forward. He thought, kindness doesn't travel in a straight line, it circles. He thought about a stairwell in Newark in 1974. A woman saying bring him up at 5:30. A yellow kitchen, oatmeal with brown sugar, a radio playing gospel, 4 years of safety. A child who grew into something the whole world knew about, who drove to Apopka on a Tuesday afternoon because a neighbor made a call. He thought about the trust named for his mother, the 7 properties, the 11 families, the lemon tree in a pot, the 5 years Rosa Esteves had given her tree to take root in new ground. He thought about Lawrence's persimmon tree, planted for an anniversary in 1994, still producing fruit in 2025, still green in January 2026, still completely itself. He thought about what outlasts us, what we plant that others will eat from, what we give that comes back in forms we could not have predicted. He thought about his mother, who is still alive, who he calls on Tuesdays, who said, when he told her about Doris, when he said the name out loud, Doris Mae Simmons from the 3rd floor on Clinton Avenue, was quiet for a long moment, and then said in a voice that had changed to the other register, the one he had only heard at the very big moments, "Is she all right?" "Ah, she's all right," he had said. "She's going to stay in her house." His mother had been quiet. Then she said, "You tell her I said thank you. You tell her I never forgot." He had gone back and told her. He had sat across from Doris at the blue and white checkered tablecloth in the yellow kitchen, and he had said his mother wants you to know she never forgot. Doris had nodded once, slowly, the way you nod when you receive something you have been carrying for a long time without knowing it was being kept. "Neither did I," she said. And outside number 7 Briar Ridge Court in Apopka, Florida, in the cool, clear January morning, the persimmon tree stands in the side yard where Lawrence planted it 31 years ago. It is bare of fruit right now, but it is green, and in April it will bloom, and in October it will be heavy, and Doris Mae Simmons will pick the fruit herself, the way she has always picked it, and she will make the jam and bring some to Yvette and some to Ellison Carter at number 3, and some to Margaret Odom at number 11, and she will keep some for herself, and she will make Deshawn eat some when he visits, because he has been eating from that tree since he was small. And the yellow curtains will be in the kitchen window, and the radio will be on the counter, and the door will be the door of a woman who stayed, who was always staying, who is here now. And that is the story of a yellow kitchen and a persimmon tree, and the thing that circles back when you plant kindness in a stairwell and trust it to find its way home. One thing that Yvette Caldwell did not expect when she made the call on April 8th was that the call would change her own life as well as Doris's. She had made it as a neighbor, as a person who had lived next door for 19 years and had watched a woman she cared about receive a document that no 79-year-old should have to receive, and had sat with the knowledge of it for 3 days before deciding she was going to do something. She had not expected to be part of what came next, but Karen Osei called her in May, not about Doris, about the Briar Ridge Initiative. Karen had been talking to other residents in the area, trying to understand the full scope of the displacement pressure in the corridor. She had heard about Yvette from Doris. She called. Yvette was a retired school administrator. She had spent 27 years managing complex systems in Orange County public schools. She knew how to track things. She knew how to identify patterns. She knew how to connect residents with resources and how to build the kind of documentation that made programs legible to institutions. Karen recognized this in the first 20 minutes of the call. She offered Yvette a part-time position as a community liaison for the Briar Ridge Initiative. Yvette said she would think about it. She thought about it for 2 days. She said yes. By July, Yvette was spending 12 hours a week identifying other residents in the Apopka corridor who were facing similar situations. Fixed-income seniors whose housing was being absorbed by development portfolios. People who said they were fine. People who were fine in the way that Doris had been fine, which was managing carefully and alone with a plan that was going to require something to go right. She found 14 families between July and December of 2025. 14 families in a corridor of about 4 miles. Elderly residents, mostly. Some with adult children who lived far away and didn't know how bad it had gotten. Some entirely alone. Some with the specific fierce independence of people who had built their stability from nothing and would not ask anyone to help them protect it. She sat in their kitchens. She drank their coffee. She let them tell her what was happening at whatever pace they needed to tell it. She did not rush them. She did not bring forms. She brought herself, and she listened, and then she called Karen. The trust helped 8 of the 14. 4 of the others found solutions through family members once the situation was clearly named. 2 remained in process as of December 2025. Yvette made a document. She called it the Briar Ridge Register. It was a record of every resident she had spoken with, what they faced, what happened. It was organized by date and outcome. It was not for publication. It was for the trust, so that the work was legible and could continue after Yvette. She showed it to Doris in November. They sat at Doris's kitchen table with the blue and white checkered cloth and the yellow curtains, and Yvette turned the pages and Doris read. Doris was quiet for a long time when she finished. "You did all this," she said. "You started it," Yvette said. Doris shook her head. "I was just trying not to be put out of my house." "That's how most things start," Yvette said. "Someone trying not to lose something that matters." Doris looked at the document, at the 14 names, at the dates. She thought about Lawrence planting the tree. He had said they would be eating persimmons for the rest of their lives. He had not known his rest of his life was 8 months. He had planted it anyway. She thought about a stairwell in Newark in 1974. A young woman with a baby who was too large for his carrier. She had not known what would come of opening the door. She had opened it anyway. She closed the register. She put her hand on Yvette's hand. She did not say anything. She did not need to. In February 2026, the Briar Ridge Initiative published its first public-facing summary. 1 page. A description of the program's scope, the number of households served, the structure of the trust. No names of residents, no photographs, no naming of the funding source, the contact information for Karen Osei and the trust. The 1-page summary was distributed to 6 community organizations in Orange County and posted on a neighborhood resource website that had 400 subscribers. Within 2 weeks, the trust had received 19 inquiries from residents in other parts of the county facing similar situations. Karen responded to all 19. The program had not gone viral. It had not been the subject of a television segment or a major newspaper story. It had traveled the way things travel when they are genuinely useful, which is person to person, quietly, through the specific networks of people who need the thing and know others who need the thing. Shaq reviewed the first public summary on a Tuesday morning in February. He read it once. He sent Karen a message. The message said, "Good work." That was all. That was sufficient. His mother had a word for this kind of work. She called it the daily thing. She meant the things you do every day that do not feel like they are changing the world because they do not announce themselves as world-changing. The cooking, the showing up, the door that you open in a stairwell on a regular morning because someone knocked and you opened it. She had told him this when he was 15 and impatient, wanting the large moments, wanting the announcements, wanting to feel the size of the thing he was doing. She had said that the daily thing is how most of the important things get done. She said that quietly, and she did not need to say it twice. He had remembered it. He was remembering it now. On a Saturday in March 2026, Shaq drove to Briar Ridge Court for the 16th time since April of 2025. Almost exactly a year. He brought the paper bag from the diner on US 441. The right biscuits. He always got the right biscuits now. He knew which ones. Deshaun was there. He was leaving for Gainesville in August. He was spending his Saturdays the way people spend the last months before a large change, which is by being very present in the place they are about to leave. Doris was in the garden when Shaq arrived, not on her knees yet. She had stopped doing that in January, the knee-level gardening, and had asked Ellison Carter at number 3 to build her some raised beds, which he had done over 2 weekends in February, with wood from the hardware store, and a cheerfulness that suggested he had been waiting to be useful, and was glad to have been asked. The raised beds were along the back fence. Green things were already coming up in them. The specific improbable optimism of seeds in March in Florida. They had breakfast on the back porch, the March morning. The light doing what March light does in Florida, which is its warmest, most generous version before the heat arrives and makes warmth into something you have to manage rather than receive. Deshaun talked about his plans. He was going to study mechanical engineering. He had a summer internship with an engineering firm in Tampa between his first and second year. He had already been in contact with the department chair at UF about research opportunities. He talked the way he always talked, with his hands, with his whole body, the particular energy of someone who can finally see the path clearly and is moving toward it. Doris watched him. Shaq watched Doris watch him. He thought, this is what it comes to. A woman in a stairwell in 1974 who said yes. And 51 years later her grandson is going to the University of Florida to study engineering. The line between those two things is not a straight line, but it exists. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. We have viewers from Orlando and Newark and Apopka and every city where someone opened a door for a child who was not theirs. We read every single comment, every one. If this story moved you, please hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps this reach someone tonight who needs to hear that kindness comes back, that what you plant circles, that the yellow kitchen is still yellow. Share this with one person today, just one. The one who knows who their Doris is, because that is exactly how this travels. One stairwell, one door, 530. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now because the next story is something you are absolutely not going to see coming. We will see you there.